I'm Leon Todd for G66. Welcome to another Tuesday Tone Tip. On today's video, I want to show you how to set up stereo amps on the FM9 and Axe-Fx III, as well as some examples of how I would personally use this. Before we get started, I'm running the Class A 30-watt Brilliant amp model with my free cab IR and a little bit of the large room reverb. This is a Charles Chillier Bell Aurora. Let's hear the tapped neck pickup, then the bridge humbucker. I absolutely love this amp model. Now, I want to give you a quick example of basically just running a stereo time-based effect on here. We're going to add some chorus after the amp and cab. This is the Dimension 1 chorus on here. I'll go back to the neck pickup. Let's hear it without the chorus and then with it. It's going to make everything sound super wide. I love the stereo width on there, but sometimes I like to run chorus before the amp, so before any distortion. It's a slightly different sound, a slightly different texture. If I just move this block over here, I'm going to get a very similar kind of tone, but I'm going to lose that stereo image. Another example would be running a delay that has some stereo modulation. I've got the digital stereo dialed up for a dotted eighth note delay. In the modulation section, I've added a little bit of rate and depth, and you can see the phase offset is at 90 degrees. The repeats on this are going to sound extra wide because of that phase offset. Check it out. Now, of course, you need to be listening in stereo to hear that, but that's an effect that I really love with delay modulation. However, with this sort of delay and this sort of amp, I quite like running the delay before the amp. It kind of gives you more of a percussive rhythmic effect. But if I do that in front of this amp, I'm losing that stereo modulation again. So there's two very basic examples of why I would want stereo amps on the FM9 and the Axe-Fx III. The second thing we should do is actually set them up, and it's very straightforward. You actually don't need a second cab block in here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the cab section and set this up. I always kind of forget this, that's why I'm going to do it first. We're going to change the cab input mode to stereo, and we're going to load the exact same IR into the first two slots over here. So we've got user slot number 1. This is just for what I'm using. I want my custom IR in here. Again, whatever IR you're using, it doesn't matter. It's about this process. So we've got slot 1 and 2 are loaded up. Then we're going to pan these hard left and hard right. At the moment, we won't hear a difference, but what we're going to do now is come over to the amp block. I'm going to right click it. I'm going to go to edit and copy block. I'm then going to paste this block underneath, and I'm going to cable it up. So now we've got 2 amps and 2 IRs. The IR or the cab block over here is set to stereo, but I haven't quite done it yet. If we just have a listen to this, all I'm going to have are the same 2 amp sounds, 2 mono amps essentially panned straight down the center. So it's just louder mono. I don't want that. I don't want louder mono. I want stereo. So I'm going to go to the first amp block. I'm going to select the input to be left, and I'm going to change the balance all the way down here. So now I'm taking the left channel of whatever's coming before it, in this case, the chorus block. I'm processing it with the amp block, and I'm spitting it out on the left channel. I'm going to do a similar process on the second amp, but I'm going to have right for the input select. So this is going to process the right audio channel of this block, and then we're going to pan that to the right. So our right channel comes back out the right. Have a listen to the difference now. I've got stereo chorus before a stereo pair of amps and cabs over here. So that's the setup. We can also hear that delay that I had going on before, the digital stereo with the stereo modulation on there. This is now going to give me a lovely wide effect with these kind of cool rhythmic settings in front of the amp. Check it out. Of course, if you had something like a panning delay, now you can run it in front of this stereo pair. Now for me personally, with a panning delay or a chorus, I probably like it post-gain most of the time, but there are definitely cases where I like it pre-gain. It's kind of grittier and dirtier, and it's got a different character in there. Another really fun trick would be to run something like a subtle phaser. So I'm going to drop a phaser block in place of my delay over here. And at the moment, I've got the Stripe 90 set up, but you go to the LFO, and this will work with any time-based effect over here. We're going to set the phase, which is normally at 0. We're going to turn it up to 90. So before I hit enter, this is just going to be a kind of standard, phase 90 style tone. It's subtle, but that stereo image is just a lot more interesting. And if you're tracking guitars in the studio and you want to have a character part that you don't have to double track, you could record these stereo amps with, say, that stereo phaser trick in there or some rhythmic delays just to make it sound a little bit bigger and wider. Another fun trick is using something like a ping pong delay, but with a very short delay time in front of a pair of stereo amps like this, just to give it like a faux room sound. We'll hear it with and without. again, it's a little grittier and dirtier in front of the pair of amps there. Of course, if you were using external pedals with your Axe-Fx or FM9 and some of them were stereo and you wanted to maintain that stereo image, you could use this same setup, just use input 2 or input 3 on the grid before your pair of amps. So you would go into those stereo inputs on the unit, use this stereo amp setup trick. So we're setting the first amp input select to left, panning it hard left, setting the second amp input select to right, panning it hard right, and then using a pair of IRs with the cab input mode set to stereo. That's the very basic setup. You can then start playing around with different cab IRs in each of the left and right slots. You can play around with how far out you pan these two controls over here. You could use different amps. You could use the same amp with slightly different settings just to get more of a stereo spread in there. And again, play around with those stereo time-based effects, and with the modulation or in the LFO, try a 90-degree or a 180-degree offset in there just to add some space to your guitar tone in there. It's one of the really fun things that we can do with true stereo amps on here. So if you've got any other questions, please let me know in the comments section below. Hopefully this provides a useful reference point for anyone wanting to set this up and have some fun with it. And as always, let me know any suggestions for future Tuesday tone tips in the comments section below. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.